Lady Jess, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. So, I have a nickname, and I've told my story. If you ask me nicely, I'll tell you. But I want to know. I want to know the story about your name first, and then in exchange, I'll tell you the deep dark secret.
Yeah, no problem. When I first started contracting, it was for the Tonight Show, for the Roots, on the Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, and that is kind of like home for me for contracting. And I contracted a group of string players for Pete Townsend on the Tonight Show from The Who. And one of my players was grateful for the work and wrote me a thank you card, and it said Lady Jess on the outside, like her nickname for me. That's it. So every time I use it, I think of her. Her name is Robin Massey. She's a brilliant violist out of Baltimore, but I think she's in Atlanta now, Black violist. And so, yeah, she gave me that nickname, and then I just chose to keep it as my stage name.
The sort of organic approach to nicknames is something that I'm a fan of.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny because to that point, at that point, I had definitely become much more extroverted both in playing and in contracting. And so, I felt like I just felt a certain way, and I felt that growth, but I never consciously decided to choose a stage name. I assumed that I wouldn't do that until I got an LLC. And it just, when it happened, it was like so perfect and so right on time that I really felt blessed by her in that moment.
It's interesting. In my case, I think if my dad hadn't given me the nickname when I was so young, I don't think I would have chosen a nickname.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those things, and totally organic. I mean, it's a name my dad. Okay, so here's the story. So I grew up in the country in a old farmhouse. We renovated the house, and we say that again.
In Ohio?
Yeah, no, in Michigan. Okay.
I don't know where you're
born in Ohio. Yeah, right. So I was born in Ohio, in Columbus, Ohio, but then when I was 5, my dad's job moved us to Michigan.
Okay.
And it was Eaton Rapids, and it's about equal distance between Eaton Rapids proper, the city limits, and Lansing.
Okay.
And Lansing is the capital of Michigan. So kind of in the center of the state. And in that in-between, there's a lot of dirt roads. So I grew up on a dirt road, and it's still a dirt road.
Nice.
Horses and go-karts and four-wheelers and bicycles and all kind of stuff. Totally different than the upbringing my dad had. He wanted that to be different for us. So anyhow, this house was probably built in 1920 or something, and it has what's called a Michigan basement. And what that means is that there's a dungeon below.
So that's not a cellar under the basement. It's a dungeon.
Well, the basement is a dungeon. It's leaked like crazy, just funky.
Yeah, we grew up in the South, so we didn't have a basement. So the concept of a basement is terrifying to me as a fully grown adult. I think horror films.
It might be terrifying to me too, because because there was the dungeon down there. So I mean, I know that there was one side of the basement. There was the side of the basement that the furnace was on, and that was the closest to coming downstairs. And then there was the far side of the basement, and I didn't want to go on that side of the basement. I left that side of the basement.
Yeah,
okay. So anyhow, actually, the story takes place upstairs. So because of the hollow floors in this house, as I would run through the house, thump, 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 it was quite thunderous. So yes, that's how thunder came about.
That's endearing. I like it.
Yes. So that would be if
that would have been my sister growing up.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Always just
Yeah. I think anybody could have thundered through, and I think it was more an indication of the house than it was of me per se. But I'll take the name either way. And it's still organic. Yeah, totally. And then I finished my doctorate in 19 or something, and one of my students sent me an image of a knockoff of Dr. Pepper called Dr. Thunder. Okay. Now, I could go further with this, but I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to leave it there.
Okay.
And so Dr. Thunder was born. So anyhow, I think I was aware of Dr. Thunder prior to that, but I think that sort of sealed the deal.
I feel like I've heard of it. Maybe it's like a Food Lion brand or a Publix. It's like a grocery store version.
Walmart.
It's Sam's Club, isn't it?
Walmart.
Yeah,
yep.
That's what I've seen it. I'm like, I've seen that. Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna have to go into further because you're asking more about this. It sounds like you're really interested in this story. So a buddy of mine, he's actually collaborated with me on my book, How to Improvise and Record Changes.
Nice.
He's actually studied with me. He was a graduate student, but he was doing his doctorate, and and he finished his degree. I don't know, a couple years or something, maybe 3 or 4 years before I finished my degree. And he was very encouraging and stuff, throughout and everything. And of course, he understood what was going on with that. And so when I finished, I told him, okay, it's done. Great. So then he thought that meant that he needed to do something, extravagant, And this dude is a straight comedian. So what he decided to do was he got in touch with my wife. He got in touch with the person that manages the building that I work in, where my office is, and then another a friend of mine named Pete Mills, a great saxophone player from Columbus. And so then basically he went around to Walmart, a bunch of Walmarts, and he bought as much Dr. Thunder as he could. Okay?
He's a real friend.
Yeah, he's a real friend. That's right. And what was it? Did he tell me he had a wheelbarrow or something? Whatever it is, there's a lot of labor associated with this. Yeah, I mean,
heavy. Those aren't light.
No, he was really committed to this.
We're talking pallets here, right?
He told me, okay, so he put all this Dr. Thunder into there. Then he filmed a video and put it on Facebook even before I had seen my office. And it was him walking around in my office saying, hey, we got Dr. Thunder here and Dr. Thunder there and all like this. And it was crazy.
Thank you so much for watching my video so far. If you'd like to support, there are several ways to do so below. Also, likes are free. Please comment, share, and subscribe. Now back to the video.
He told me that the only thing that he regretted is that he couldn't find more Dr. Thunder.
Oh my God.
Like he wanted to put like a pallet like right in the middle of the floor, so I have to like scale around it. It was like
That would have been ideal.
yeah, it totally was. He's a good dude. Keith Newton is his name.
Nice.
Okay, so what got you playing? What got you playing music?
Well, my father is a jazz percussionist. He used to play with a funk band called Funkus Blues. And my mom plays piano, but she never played professionally. But because of that, we were always around music all the time. My parents are visual artists, so that was their main profession, but I'm the child of freelancers, and now I am one. And so my mom being a graphic designer, my dad being his medium is charcoal and pastel. And he's also a courtroom sketch artist. And so we were just like, my parents just had on music all the time, absolutely all the time. And so we were surrounded, and my dad's preferred jazz breakdown is like experimental classic jazz. Like we just were raised around it all the time. And then when I was 8 years old, I saw a Black kid playing violin on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And I told my mom that I was better than him. And she was like, we should get lessons actually before you start trash talking. And so that's how I started.
All right. And, I met you because we were both on a panel discussion. Mm-hmm. And it was for, Chamber Music Columbus. Mm-hmm. And that was actually my first, the first time that I've been asked to do something with them.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
And Mark Lomax, actually, he's a great musician, great drummer. He played drums in my band when I first moved to Columbus back in 2004. So we have some history, and then he did his master's and his doctorate at Ohio State. Okay. And so I saw him around quite a bit. And the flute professor at Ohio State is Kathy Jones. Okay. And she was, involved in the bringing us all together. So there were some interesting topics on that panel. Not to mention a sort of this is the first time I've ever been on Zoom where people that weren't invited
Zoom bomb
hack and get in. Yeah,
that was wild.
That was all kind of crazy. I had heard all of these stories about security issues with Zoom, and I was like, I think that stuff's not. That's not true. That's not true.
Real.
Yeah,
real, as we learned. And honestly, I was a little concerned when they made the link public, because to that date, I had never been on a Zoom call that had been bombed, because I had never been on a public Zoom call until that point. Right. All the panel stuff, all of that was all like not public. And so I just got comfortable. That was the first time that I was on a public call to God. And it was like when it happened. And so when it happened, I was like, see, this is why. I should have said something, because I was going to write them and be like, are you sure you want to, keep this available to Gym Pop? But I was like, it's not, I'm gonna leave it alone. I'm just, I'm gonna trust that it's just gonna be classical music people, because quite frankly, like, the mainstream world is not tuned in to chamber music Columbus. But no, it was same thing. It was the same kind of bomb that I've heard all my friends talking about that I have been lucky to avoid to that point.
Yeah, some pretty nasty things that they were saying, and one of the panelists was pretty distraught by it, and so we spent some time trying to sort of get us back to talking. Yeah. But one thing, and I would agree with the sentiment. One thing that you said was that you hadn't noticed any particular, like, more discrimination or something in the South than you had other places. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because that's not what people say. It's not the general consensus.
Yeah, and it was so normal to me. I mean, there are so many Black people in the South, and like per mile, like there's, when you just proportionally, when you put like New York and like North Carolina side by side, or New York and Georgia, like Black people are in the South, and we always have been. We were taken there at the beginning when we first got here, and so when I moved to New York, that was the first time that I was like in my communities where I work, where I play, in my neighborhood. Once it started to become gentrified, I was just like, there's no real sense of community here, because everyone has their subgroups and they're comfortable in those groups, and you have to have your safe group when you're living in New York, because it is like a ruthless city if you don't. But as a result, New York is very segregated. Whereas in the South, like, I had friends who were white, I had friends who were Black, I had friends who were Latino, I had friends who were Asian, like, and everybody, I don't know, it was a lot more diverse. And I am a product of the public school system. And so I had a bevy of public school music educators who were extremely committed to all of us. There was no like delineation between poor or not, in need or not. It was like, if you were in school and you wanted to play an instrument, the teachers are really committed. And the programs outside of school that were connected to it, like the Regional Honors Orchestra, the All-State Honors Orchestra, all of those programs were fuel for me. And they were, in addition to being in the youth orchestra, the in-school programs were a savior to me. Like in high school, at my high school, which was public, we had 6 orchestras and 6 bands and 5 choirs. And so it was like understood that the arts had a definite place in the curriculum. And so, I mean, for me, the concept of Black string players was not like so far-fetched. I just didn't know any. I was like, I know they're out there because I know so many Black people in the South. I just don't know any. And so I didn't meet Black string players until I moved up north. But even then it was like, this is crazy. Like, this just is so weird in my mind, because I did the first Color of Music Festival. I don't know if you're familiar, in Charleston. I did the very first one. And I remember at the planning meetings, because the musicians were driving down in cars as opposed to flying, which was crazy to me from jump. I was like, y'all know how far this is, right? But we did. We drove from New York to South Carolina to Charleston in carpools. And at the planning meeting, all these New York musicians were like, I don't know if we should travel this way. It's like sundown towns. I'm like, you're traveling on I-85 through North Carolina. Like, you're going to be fine. Nobody's going to stop. Like, they had an actual like phobia of the South. And that was the first time that I realized, like, whoa, like the rest of the world is not hip to the fact that Black people actually exist in droves in the South and are a force, as we saw in the election. And so that's also why I did that festival, because to that point, there were no festivals for Black people in the South. And so it was, I mean, you know, it's interesting. I think that there still needs to be more string players, Black string players down South, but that's conducive to the freelancing environment, and it ain't great down there. I'm going to be honest, depending on where you are. I mean, you can make a career in Atlanta. You can do well in Charlotte. I did pretty well in Charlotte as a freelancer before I moved to New York. But still, it's very hard to break into, you know, limited number of gigs. And so I think that's why a lot of people don't know. It's like they don't really have a reason to know unless the industry is busy enough to support freelancing careers the way that like pre-COVID New York was. They wouldn't have a reason to know.
Yeah, this is, it's interesting because, I mean, I've done a fair amount of touring. I tour with the Count Basie Orchestra.
Nice.
And I've done a number of other things, done some touring with the Cab Calloway Band, and then just gigs and things for my own bands and things. And I found myself in the South pretty frequently. I've never had any experiences that were any different than anywhere else. And I always thought to myself and wondered if this, I wonder if this Southern, you know, like overt and aggressive racism stuff that people are constantly refer to, especially politicians, if that is like, if that's like a real thing, but I've never experienced it. And I mean, I don't live in the South, but I've never had any bad experiences. So
I definitely
all of my funky experiences have been in the North.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that there's definitely been like all over the country, you know, races have been emboldened in the last 4 years. Like we know that. But from my experience, racists in the South avoid places where Black people are because they don't want to, like, they literally hate Black people, so they avoid them. And there are so many Black people in the South that if there are enough Black people in one place, racists are not going to go over there. And that's just it. And the way I was raised is that we were taught where not to go. There were streets, you know, that were kind of like shady, because Charlotte, people don't realize that Charlotte now is not the Charlotte that it was when I was growing up. The Charlotte of the 80s and 90s was one of the nation's roughest cities for gang violence, for anything you could think of, basically. And I only know that because my father, I was raised religious, so my dad preached a lot in areas that cops wouldn't even go to. But he was able to do that because he had a past that enabled him to be able to communicate with these guys in a way that, you know, they understood. It was like a mutual respect kind of thing. But the city itself is rough. And so that was the drama that we were dealing with. It wasn't, you know, racism. The racism happened on the outskirts of town. It happened, you know, there were certain parts of the city, but we knew where those places were, and we knew where not to go. And, you know, I don't know. But now it's so different, you know, because the city itself at large has been so gentrified. There are so many transplants there now. So things are a little different. And then again, like the last 4 years really just, so, I mean, I don't know. I haven't lived there in years. So, but when I go back, it feels fine. And I never have experienced blatant racism in Charlotte, but it does exist. It definitely does exist. I just haven't experienced it the way that I have experienced it up north.
You know, the only instances of blatant racism that I've ever experienced were, and when I say blatant, I mean someone saying something to me. You know,
Yeah.
We're in the North. I mean, I remember one instance when I was, let's see, I must have been first grade, and some fifth grader comes up to me, you know, calls me the N-word. You know, that's like,
Yeah, I've
right?
had isolated incidents like that. Yeah, I got in my first fight because my mom is white and my dad is black, and this kid on the school bus said my daddy had jungle fever, and I just hit him, and that was the end of the fight. And because I was like very quiet, and I normally just read books on the school bus, the bus driver acted like she didn't even see it. She was like, "Just have a great day." True story. She was like, I was like, "Are you going to tell my dad?" She's like, "I won't say anything." She's like, "It's good."
So, what was I going to ask you? See, part of me would prefer, and does prefer, for people to let me know who they are. Like, I want to know if you're the racist person, I want you to do something.
Let me know so I can stay away from you.
Exactly. So I know not to associate with you, not to trust you, not to have my kids around you, you know, not to depend on you for anything, not to tell you anything in confidence, and all of those kind of things. What I've been very much frustrated with, so growing up in Michigan, and I said a little bit of this on that panel. Growing up in Michigan, the effect of Detroit, as far as causing a lot of integration of the arts and a lot of different kind of people, you know, collaborating on projects,
Right.
you know, and so there was a lot of that going on. And so when I moved to Columbus, I was like, what is going on here? It's like everybody is staying, you know, to themselves, and there's all this sort of fear of the other and all of that kind of stuff going on, and just a lot of misinformation and stuff. And I was like, wow, this is deep.
Yeah.
And probably the place that I've experienced the most consistent, obviously racially motivated, racially charged, racial undertones, overtones, you know, effects on the way that the system is designed, frankly, has been in academia.
Yeah, 100%.
And
I've seen it. I teach, so you know.
yeah, it wasn't out in the country.
It's why I moved from teaching to a board position, because I was like, I can't. You guys are so lost. I have to be part of the change at this level, because this ain't it. As a teacher, I'm not listening. Like, you guys aren't listening to me as a teacher. But if I come in with a board seat, if I invest in the thing, now you want to know what I have to say. So.
Right. Although you've been saying the same stuff.
Exactly. I'm literally saying the same thing.
I have to say, that's one of the...
Never fail.
Okay. So this last, 9 months, 10 months, whatever it's been, a year, since the racial stuff really got charged up, you know, I've been saying the same things. I've been saying the same things, you know, forever and ever, amen. But now, for some reason, certain folks want to pretend like they want to hear what I want to say. And it always makes me question the motives, because I'm not saying anything different. How come all of a sudden you can hear what I'm saying now? And then that just makes me wonder, are you honestly have had a come to Jesus moment?
No.
Or are you just afraid?
You're scared.
Yeah.
They're scaring because they heard you the whole time. They just chose to listen now.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I guess that's what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, but like, that's real. That's where we're at, you know?
Yeah. And it makes me sort of, I've always been when I was a kid, I really loved Malcolm X. And I had his autobiography. I had like a poster on my wall. And, the Spike Lee movie, of course I wasn't a kid by the time that came out, but all of that stuff, he had that sort of swag that, he was the rebel. He had this, amazing, power, and I was like, man, that's what I'm talking about. I mean, so well spoken, always the smartest dude in the room, all of that kind of stuff, but Martin always got most of the press, and I think he got most of the press because his message created less fear. It was and I have to admit, at one point, I think that I stopped appreciating certain aspects, the by any means necessary. I stopped really appreciating that until fairly recently, when I've had sort of a rebirth of my black nationalist roots.
As it were.
Well, the thing. So the thing is that although Martin got the press, I think people changed because of Malcolm, because they were afraid. And that's, and you would like to think that, well, maybe people are better than that now. Maybe they'll actually do it, but I don't see it.
They never changed. They just became more vocal as we go on, as the internet evolves. And, it's my opinion that the internet and technology is evolving faster than what's like organic to human consciousness. And I think it creates this chaos where bizarre things are trending and like nothing is making sense. And I think that I really do think that the evolution of the internet and technology and TikTok and everything happening so fast, I just think it's happening faster now than it ever has in human history. And I just don't think that we as humans have adapted to it yet. That's my honest, novice. I don't know. I'm not no expert, but that's what I've noticed.
Yeah.
And I think it all just kind of came to the surface during COVID because we were home.
Certainly, this will sound like a transition. Certainly, the dating market has not recovered. I think that the internet, social media, dating apps, and all of that stuff, what it's basically done is it has sort of propped up and benefited maybe the top 10% or so of men.
Mm-hmm.
So, and therefore, I think alienated probably the bottom 80% of men that are pretty much invisible. Mm-hmm. It's created challenges that way, and it's created stuff like, do you know this guy Derrick Jaxn? Have you? Oh, okay.
Yes, well versed.
We'll talk about a narcissist. I mean, how closely have you followed some? Yeah, this is ridiculous. This is like,
But that's what I mean. That's a great example of what I mean, like the absurdity of it, of him making a reaction video to himself in third person.
you really know.
Oh yeah, I know.
Good.
I'm gonna tell you
All
why.
right.
Is the comedian Godfrey? Do you know of his work? He just did a Netflix special with Tiffany Haddish. His name is Godfrey. Godfrey, the Nigerian American comedian. Anyway, he's a good friend of mine, and he does lives every single night. And sometimes, like, I'll just be like in bed, and he does it very late. But since I've been out here in LA, he's doing it late on the East Coast, so it's like normal time here. So I've been watching, but I've been like online, and it's like chatter. And he brought me on live last night, and we talked about it for like half an hour. And he does a really great impression of like him doing it in third person. I just, honestly, the reason why I know it so well is because I know too many Derrick Jaxns, and I knew too many Derrick Jaxns growing up, and I knew too many Derrick Jaxns that were never held accountable for the manipulation of it all, and B, too many Derrick Jaxns have directly caused trauma that I and too many other women I know have been through at the hands of narcissists, because we don't know, because we're listening and we believe. And so it was funny to me. It was just funny to me until I saw the interview with his wife where he had her hand like this. And that was,
my goodness.
Okay, so this man feels dangerous to me. He literally feels dangerous to me. And I think it's important, like his position in the social climate right now, the absurdity of it all is absurd. But I also think it's important because it has started so many dialogues about things like this kind of toxicity in the church never being addressed, people telling her to cling to the marriage and fight for her marriage when he clearly is like really messed up and everybody needs therapy. And so it's just, I don't know. It has it's a bigger picture thing for me. And that's why I know it.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a segment of YouTube, and there's all kinds of folks that are in this segment called the Manosphere. And in particular, there's a segment called the Black Manosphere, which is quite a bit different than the Manosphere. There's a lot more sort of content created to try to help guys to become their best self and all that kind of stuff. But they have been railing against this guy for like months and years. They've been saying this
about men too.
Right. Well, it's not just that. It's that all of this stuff that he's saying, they know the playbook. So they know that stuff is hogwash. They know that he's telling, he's lying, he's manipulating, he's doing all this stuff. Yeah. And so it's been like a major vindication for them. And there's been a lot of content, a lot of videos where they're playing back the same stuff. But one thing it seems like there's been a lack of in this scenario is it doesn't seem like there's been very much interest in really exposing the women that went after Derrick knowing that he was married.
I don't know. I guess I don't care. I really don't care. I don't think that they should be held accountable because these are adults in this situation.
No, I agree with that. Yeah. But if this guy's public persona is that he's married, X, Y, and Z, part of what keeps this stuff even possible to happen are willing participants.
He's been cheating since before they were married, right?
Of course. And that's my point.
I mean,
but that's my point.
Yeah.
There's like this idealizing again, of a certain percentage of guys, and then it doesn't seem to matter. They have access to whatever they want, even if it's known that they're married.
Yeah,
I think that's a problem.
That might be a problem, but I'll tell you very frankly that in the, let's see, I've been working professionally for, since 2006. So what's that? I don't know, long time. And consistently, absolutely consistently, my issue has been married men hitting on me and assuming that because I'm very easy to get along with, I'm just going to be like, it's going to be an understanding or an arrangement. And, you know, I did these mainstream tours, you toured, you know how it is. The tour was the first time that I really, like, I had close friends in the band who were men who were married, and I saw them become different people on the road. And they're like, Jess, like, you don't know, like, this is what, I mean, you know, we're on tour, you're on tour, whatever. And I don't think that anybody really wants to be accountable for anything, honestly. And I have wasted way too much energy on, you know, trying to have the conversations and trying to talk about why, when literally on like 95% of the work I've done, there's always been a married man like, hey, what's up? Hey, what's up? Because I am kind and I'm open and I'm, you know, I'm all about the shit, but I wear nice things. Like, I care about how I look. And it's just like, as a woman, I feel very, very, very like 90%, like I already know going in, there's going to be weirdness, there's going to be whatever, but nobody cares to hold anyone accountable for it. And so here you have this. And I don't think I really, and that's why I say the women that came forward or whatever, I have no opinion on them other than they're Black women. So I support them. His wife is a Black woman. I support her. If they approached him, that was his chance to say no, and he didn't. Period, point blank. That's how I feel about it, quite honestly. And I don't think that the onus should be on the women to like make the right decision, or I think it's
both. My point is,
you know what I mean?
My point is that it's both.
Yeah.
It's both. You know, especially if you look at the divorce numbers now, it's really sad.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons in the past why the divorce numbers weren't so high is you had more people sort of being in your business. In other words, family members, other people, like, wait a minute, aren't you with such and such? Why are you over here doing this? I mean, I think part of it was because it wasn't so easy. And then with the addition of social media and just the anonymity, Snapchat and all this stuff, it's just, to the point that you made before, I think that this stuff has developed, grown, accelerated beyond a rate that we've been able to sort of adapt to.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So you talked a little bit about how you got started. Who were some of your teachers, maybe significant teachers, folks that really helped you to kind of make certain career choices, or just kind of were really solid teachers in the beginning?
Yeah. I studied with a woman, Sarah Slechta, in Charlotte, my private teacher, and she was wonderful. She was like one of these Suzuki moguls in Charlotte. She just had this huge, like, this legacy of students. And honestly, the thing that I appreciate about her is that when it was time for me to get better, like really step up, she said, it's time for you to find someone who can take you to that next level instead of hoarding me and coveting me and trying to, you know, make me a trophy, which is a thing that teachers do a lot with students who show potential. I mean, you know that. You've probably seen that a lot. And so I appreciated her for that. And the way she was just like this ancient white woman with snow white hair and like could barely hear. And she just could see straight through me. She was the first teacher who understood my personality and understood that even though I was quiet, I was very impatient to learn certain things. And I just needed permission to speak up and like state my opinion. So that was very impactful for me. And then in high school, I studied with a teacher that played in the Charlotte Symphony. And I won't say his name because even though we had a great relationship, we had a great connection, I really loved studying with him. However, he did not adequately prepare me for my college auditions. As in, I walked into my Manhattan School of Music audition not knowing that a pianist would play with me. Like, I'd never rehearsed with an accompanist before, my first conservatory audition. And things like that are normally standard when you're studying violin. Like, you're always playing with a pianist. You should know that, you know, there were certain things, you know, like I had a Bach sonata that was part of my audition requirements, and I didn't know that it had to be memorized. So I walked in with my spiral bound Bach and they were like, can you close that? And so, you know, I really have nothing but love in my heart for him, but I do struggle a little bit with that, with the fact that I was someone with potential and with talent and who greatly loved orchestra and desperately wanted to study at a conservatory in New York because I was told that that's how you got to the orchestra game. And I was completely unprepared for those auditions. And so they were very traumatic experiences for me. But then in college, I studied with Kevin Lawrence at University of North Carolina School of the Arts, and it was called North Carolina School of the Arts back then. And it's funny because when I was in high school and I was an all-state honors orchestra, we had a section, everything took place on the North Carolina School of the Arts campus. So I had already seen the campus before I went there for college because I'd been there for youth or for all-state orchestra. And my later, the man who would become my teacher, Kevin Lawrence, he was asked to conduct a sectional that I was in. And this was my first time meeting him. And he, as a person, is very neurotic, very distinct personality. And he didn't know that he was going to have to teach. He was going to have to coach that sectional. And so he was in a terrible mood. And I hated it because all I wanted was to like learn this part. And he was just angry because he was like, these fucking kids, like nobody told me I was going to have to do this. And in that sectional, I said, I will never go to the school and I will never study with that man. And then a year later, when I came back and took the audition, he requested that I be in his studio. And so I've never had an educator choose me that way before. And so I was like, all right, cool, I'm going to go with it. I'm going to hate him, but I'm going to go with it. And we fought for like the first 2 months because I didn't have the structured training coming in. And he knew that. And that's why he wanted to take me on. I mean, he's like, in teaching circles, he's a pretty legendary pedagogue, trained with Galamian, studied with Galamian. And so he really broke through the noise, just broke right through me. And he said it was like breaking a Bronco. That's what he said at my senior recital. And so he made a huge impact on my life because he chose me, but also he recommended me for my first mainstream gig, which was Kanye West for the Touch the Sky tour. That was made possible by him. And so that was the first time that I ever played a stadium show. And I was like, I didn't sleep for like 2 days afterwards. Like, so he was very impactful for me. And then this past November, he asked me to come back and do the Chevalier St. George duo piece with orchestra with him. So it's come very full circle. But he had a huge impact on my training. And then I did a year at NYU and I studied with Gregory Fulkerson. And that was dope because Fulkerson also is the string chair at Oberlin. And so he split his time between Oberlin and NYU, and he would only come to NYU on the weekends. And so we had scale class, etude class, master class, and lessons all on the weekend for the whole studio. It was squeezed into the weekend, which was hell. So I was very cagey with him because I had already played with the symphony for 2 years, with the Charlotte Symphony for 2 years before I started grad school. Like I had to take time off to earn money. And so Fulkerson sensed that, and he was able to like read me and understand my situation and understand that I have to really hustle to stay in school because I'm everything for myself. And so he treated me like a lesser experienced colleague versus his student. And that, just that act of like, you know, faith in me, the fact that he recognized that even though I was in this academic institution, I had to that point real world orchestral experience, and I had real Broadway experience. And none of the other faculty members, like no one was terrible to me, like the faculty was great to me, but none of the other faculty members respected that outwardly the way that he did. And that did a lot for my confidence, and I needed that at that time.
So you said that you grew up religious, and you said your dad was a preacher?
Yeah, he was pretty well up in the religion. Yeah.
What kind of church?
I'd rather not say, only because my parents and I have a really interesting relationship. And after our last interview, my sister and I did one, and we were very transparent about things, and it didn't go well. So I'm kind of giving that.
Well, I'm only asking because
normally I would tell you, I'm sorry, but you know, honestly, if you look on my like Instagram, sometimes I've discussed it in the past. I just, you know, yeah.
But I understand.
It's so tricky because it's a cult.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was only saying that because I work at a church, and that's been
cool.
Yeah, and I'm a minister of music at Second Baptist Church here in Columbus. It's one of the historic black churches in the state of Ohio. I think maybe it's the third oldest or something. You know, there's this thing where there's so many talented musicians that come out of the black church. It's just now, but the thing is that I didn't grow up in that kind of church. As a matter of fact, I didn't play in church until I was in college, and it wasn't the same kind of church either. It was something weird about the church that I grew up in. Yeah.
There's a lot of weirdness about churches, and that's okay to admit. Like, it's a lot. It's a lot.
No.
And I play a lot of church music. I play a lot of gospel music, especially with Soulful Symphony. And I see gospel as American roots music, you know? And so to me,
absolutely.
You know, cultural equity is recognizing the value of that beyond outside of the theological side, like objectively, this is the same as classical music. This is the same as, like, for me, you know, it should be held in the same regard, but I'm a little unique in that I wasn't allowed to listen to gospel music growing up. Like we were like explicitly not allowed to listen to religious music with text growing up. So but my grandmother is a Black Southern Baptist, or was. She passed in January. She's Black Southern Baptist. And so it's in us, and we were around it because we were around her a lot, and she'd play it all the time. My dad would get upset, and I'm like, but it sounds so good. So like that's what's there, you know what I mean? So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the way I present even the history of jazz when I talk to my students is, so everything comes out of the early African American church. Everything, all of the music, blues, everything. It all comes out of that. All forms of popular music, jazz, everything. It all comes out of there. And we have all these seemingly sort of segregated, quote unquote, genres. And of course, genre is really a word for record companies to sell records. But we have all these streams that came from the same thing, and it's this weird sort of, again, segregation even amongst these sort of subgenres, because you have this thing where R&B musicians, they don't really play with the jazz guys. The jazz guys don't really play with the gospel guys. The gospel guys don't really play with the hip hop guys. The hip hop guys don't really play with it's there's a lot of that kind of goofy stuff that's going on, but it's all the same stuff. I mean, it's you know, the three necessary things are improvisation, polyrhythm, and blue tonality.
Yep.
And show me which one of those doesn't have that in spades. You know? So anyhow, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to keep you too long, and I've appreciated our conversation.
I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too. We'll have to come back sometime, and maybe we'll talk about Derrick Jaxn. No, that's a joke. All right.
It won't move on.
All right. Hopefully, we will have totally forgotten about this clown.
Hopefully, but I don't know, man. Everything's so wild now. I feel like you can't predict anything. Everything's just like free for all.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah, it's okay.
Well, God bless you, and thank you. And well, thank you, Lady Jess.
No problem. My pleasure. Have a good one.
Be in touch.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, bye.